Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today we're going to do an original book tag that I'm calling You Want Me to Go Where? I've had this idea for a while now that I would like to create a tag that involves making or talking about your own fantasy world. And I think I'm gonna actually make this a series. So I'm gonna do one today where we're gonna talk about fantasy worlds, but then I'm also gonna do a sci-fi edition and a horror edition because I think that these questions kind of lend themselves to all of those genres and I might tweak them a little bit. But this is going to be my fantasy world edition of You Want Me to Go Where? And the purpose of these questions is for you guys to really dive into the worlds that our fantasy books create around us and to really think about how you would interact with that world if you were implanted in it. I find it really fun to think about things like that in the sense of I'm reading about these really crazy things that I really enjoy and I think are fascinating, but how would it be if me as a person and my family and people around me were actually implanted in these worlds? Because I think a lot of us would probably die. So I want to ask you guys several questions and I would love for you to play along in the comments or do this on your own channels. I won't be tagging anybody because I don't want to pressure anyone to doing this tag, but if this is something you're interested in and you would like to do it on your channel, please feel free to do so. Just tag me so I can watch your videos and enjoy your answers as well. The first question I have for you guys is, what fantasy world would you die the quickest in? So I actually had to think about this for quite a bit because there are lots of fantasy worlds that have things that are very capable of killing you. The Tainted Cup comes to mind because there's flora there that just wants to eat you. The Stormlight Archive comes to mind because they have like massive windstorms and wars breaking out. But I wanted to think about what is a book that has some events in it that I know I would probably not survive. And I went with The Ninth Reign. So this is a book, it's the Winnowing Flame trilogy, and it is right here behind me, these three colorful books here. And you follow a cast of characters. There are some things going on in the world that are apocalyptic. And they are trying to figure out what's going on, how they can help, and if they have any hope, essentially. So I think in knowing what happens, and I'm not going to tell you what happens, but in knowing what happens and the reason behind some of the events that are happening on this world, I don't think I would survive very long. I think that this would be a world where I would be hopeless and I would probably be one of the people who ends up cased in gelatin, which I won't say any more than that. That's probably where I would end up. The second prompt, to kind of add on to that, to give you a little bit of hope, I want you to tell me, what fantasy world do you think you might actually survive in? You guys can kind of play this however you want. So if you would like to pick like a cozy fantasy that's not, that doesn't have like a major like violent conflict, that's absolutely fine. I am going to pick Soulless from the Parasol Protectorate. And I think I'm going with this because in this world, if you haven't ever heard of Soulless, you follow Alexia Terabati, who is a preternatural, but she lives in a like Victorian era society where ghosts, vampires, and werewolves have kind of been welcomed into society, but they have been welcomed into society in such a way that they have to follow certain rules and people know about them, so they're not secretive. And I think that's why I could potentially survive in this world, because they are placed into, even though it's not modern because it's Victorian, but they are placed into an element where they are accepted into society and there are guidelines that are set. And so people kind of know what are acceptable things to do, what are not acceptable things to do, what are safe things to do, and what are not safe things to do. So I think that's why I might be able to survive this world. I absolutely love this series. I finished the first series, the Parasol Protectorate, this year and absolutely love it. So if you are interested in like a fantasy, mystery, steampunk, Victorian era fantasy, I think this is a great series. Prompt number 3 is a world that you think has the best vacation spots. So maybe not someplace you want to live, but someplace that you think you would enjoy visiting. And I actually am going to tell you a book that I did not like. A book that I think I rated, it's a 1 or a 2 star for me. It definitely was not great. And that is The House of Roots and Ruin. And I am going to describe a specific location to you. And so if you guys decide to play along at home, you can either pick a book and give me a specific location, or you can pick a book and tell me why you think that book has great vacation sites. I'm going to give you an example of both. So this book is my example of a specific location that I would like to go to. So in The House of Roots and Ruin, it's the second book in the Salt Sisters of Salt series. The first is All the Stars and Teeth, I think. And you follow a family of 12 sisters, some of which have died in succession of age. And a lot of the people in the community think they're cursed. The first book, you're trying to figure out about the curse. The second book, you follow another daughter. So that's general premise of the story. The second book has a romance element. Well, both of them do, but the second book is more heavily on the romance element. And there is a moment in time where the 2 characters who are in a relationship travel to this underwater room, and it is literally a bubble underneath I don't know if it was a pond. I'm pretty sure it was a pond. And it was completely clear glass. You could see through it, and it was raining as they were like walking through this little area. And I just thought it was such a cute, like cozy room. And I know that things like this exist like in the real world as well. But I loved how it was described. I love the fact that there was rain going on. You could see the raindrops. You could also see like the fish would react to them in their little bubble that they're looking around. And so I would pick this book that I hate even though I don't like it, just because I want to go to that one specific room. The other book, so the other way that you could kind of interpret this, is a book that you think is going to have lots of different locations that you could go to, and then you need to tell me why. So I'm going to choose for this the book that wouldn't burn. There is an element in this story. So the book that wouldn't burn, one of the characters in this is set in a library, and the library does have magical elements. And so because of this magical element, I won't tell you what it is, but because of this magical element in the book that wouldn't burn, there would be a vast number of places and things that I could visit using this magical element. And so that would be that book. Just so I can share with you the premise of that as well, even though I know I've talked about that a ton on my channel, you do follow 2 main POVs. You have Ivar and Lavara. Ivar is in the library, and his family is in the library. They've been stuck in the library for generations, and it's kind of a prison to them. And so he is trying to figure out a way for them to get out. You have Lavara, who lives out in the dust, which is a village outside of city limits where they are impoverished and don't have a lot of food. It's a very hard life, and her village ends up getting attacked, and she ends up having to travel to the city. Their storylines intertwine, and you get to see a larger cityscape, a larger world view by putting their 2 perspectives together, which I really enjoyed. Prompt number 4, we're gonna go evil for a minute. I said, and I kind of stole this from Leandra's recent video where she did the 5 books on a desert island and then the books that you would send your worst enemy. So I'm gonna steal that idea and do a place that you would like to send your worst enemy to. So what is a fantasy world that you would send your worst enemy to? I chose the Tainted Cup for this. So I know I mentioned this before in worlds that we would die, or I would die, and I probably would die in the Tainted Cup, but there are like areas in the Tainted Cup that are not as dangerous. And so that's why I didn't pick that for myself. However, some of the overarching themes in the Tainted Cup, the overarching conflicts that are happening within this continent, I think are very scary. And if I could choose specifically where my enemy would go, it would definitely be on the Outer Rim, and specifically in one village that was affected heavily is all I will say about that. So if you know, you know. If you haven't heard me talk about the Tainted Cup, it is a Sherlock Holmes inspired fantasy mystery where you are living in this society where leviathans who live out in the sea constantly are coming up onto shore and destroying villages, and so they have built up walls to keep them at bay. And you also have the people, the like hierarchy of the government who is helping manage all of this. Well, one of those government officials gets murdered, and you have to figure out why. And I really enjoyed this. It was fantastic. I can't wait for this series to continue, even though the second book is not written yet. But yeah, this is where I would definitely sit my worst enemy. The next prompt is, which magic system from any fantasy world do you think you would actually be good at? So I want you to think about like what your skill set is, what your weaknesses are, what things you enjoy. And I want you to think about which magic system do you actually think that you might be able to succeed at, that would be easier for you to catch on to than some of the others. For me, I chose the magic system from the Defensive Guide or A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher, which is a middle grade fantasy about a young girl who has a magic that helps her bake. And so she can kind of control doughs, and she can let her like a muffin dough, she can tell it to come out of the oven just right. There are different things that she has the capability of doing that help her bake in her bakery. And very early on in the story, I think it's like first or second chapter, she finds a dead body in her bakery and has to figure out what to do about it. And I love this book. It was hilarious. And I think I could master this magic because I love to bake, and I think it would give me a little bit of an advantage above some other people, and I do find baking very calming, and so having a magic that kind of adds to that as well, I think would just be amazing. Prompt number 6 is the opposite of that, so I want you to think back on your weaknesses. Which fantasy world has a magic system that you think you would epically fail at? For me, I picked Windrunning from Stormlight Archive. So Stormlight is a massive epic fantasy series by Brandon Sanderson. The first book, The Way of Kings, you follow Kaladin and you get to see his journey of becoming essentially a slave and how he has to deal with that. He's put in some very bad circumstances, and there are also these massive events that are happening in the world around him. And there is a magic system within this called Windrunning. And I won't give you specifics on like what happens within that world because I haven't read that book in a minute, and it is very long, and I don't want to give spoilers that are further along the plot than I think they are. But what you need to know about Windrunning is it essentially is a magic that allows you to, the best way I can describe it is kind of control gravity. So I can make it to where instead of gravity pulling me down, gravity actually pulls me towards that wall. And I can manipulate it in that way to allow myself to fly. Even though that's not really what you're doing, you're really just controlling gravity. The reason I think I would suck at this is because I am not coordinated at all. And I imagine anytime I would switch the gravitational pull to one wall or another, I would just smack it against it and not actually succeed in whatever I was trying to do. So I do think that that would be one magic that I would love to have, but I would probably suck at it. The last prompt for this book tag is going to be to actually build your own fantasy world with several components. The first thing that you're going to pick is the hero. So you are going to be in the limelight in this book as well, or in this fantasy world. So you are definitely going to be involved in the conflicts and things that we're going to discuss, but you're going to have a companion, a person who is also going to be considered a main character in your story. So you're going to pick who you would like to be your companion in this fantasy world. The second I want you to do is choose a setting. What book? And it could be a city, it could be an entire continent, it could be an island, it could be a school. Where specifically do you want your fantasy world, like your main story, or I guess the first book in your story, to be set? Next, you're going to choose an animal companion. I think this is self-explanatory. Which animal companion do you think that you would enjoy and that would help you on your journey? You're also going to choose a magic system or fantastical element. So it doesn't have to be magic. If you want there to be talking animals, if you want there to be fantastical creatures that don't exist. And you can kind of mix and match here. So if there are a couple of things that you want, throw them in. But I want you to pick kind of a main component. Do you want like a massive magic system that people are going to have to work with or work against? Do you want there to be dragons and, like I said, other elements, other fantastical creatures roaming around your universe? What do you want? What's your main focus? And then lastly, you need to either choose a villain or conflict. So if you don't want there to be just one person, if you want there to be a massive conflict going on in your book, you can choose that too. But so those are the components. So I want you guys to take a minute to think about it. I'm going to tell you what my choices were. And I would love, if you don't answer any of the other questions in this prompt, I would love for you to answer this one, because I think it's really interesting trying to piece together some of the things from your favorite books into one story that you think that would be interesting for you to be in. For my main character, my companion throughout my book, I chose Lady Trent from the Memoirs of Lady Trent. And as you know, because I've talked about this series a lot, she is a studier of dragons. She is a scientist. She is badass and won't let anyone tell her that she's going to do the conventional thing. She's going to do what she wants to do, and she's going to learn while she's doing it. So this is the person that I want by my side throughout my journey. The setting I chose was the city Kagmar from The Hanging City. So this is a city built under a bridge that was originally an ancient troll city. And I'm gonna say that it's been abandoned and that we're just hanging out in the city. We're trying to figure out how the city works, how like the science works, and why it's been abandoned. I'm going to say the fantastical elements that are happening in this book are going to be something akin to the fairy doors that were in Emily Wilde's. So Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies had these doors of the Fae to get into the Fae world that don't necessarily look like doors. They are hidden. They could be a shadow. It could be a pond. It could be climbing up a tree. Like there's a whole bunch of different things that could get you into this world. And I think that I would like to have some type of hidden worlds, hidden portals that we have to find throughout the Hanging City. I think that would be fascinating. And I also think that Lady Trent would really enjoy it because, like I said, she's a scientist and she's all up for solving a mystery. I also think, to kind of get into like the nerdy reason of why I chose Lady Trent for The Hanging City, is I think that she's also really into cultures. And so if we brought Lady Trent to The Hanging City, especially if it was abandoned, I can imagine her trying to figure out what the old culture was, who used to live in this environment, how they lived together, what they thought of like the people around them, and like what they enjoyed doing. Like I could just see her kind of diving into an ancient civilization, like an abandoned ancient civilization. For my animal companion, I don't know if this counts. And if you know, you know. I'm not going to tell you why I think it might not count as an animal companion. I'm going to choose Elsius from The Mask of Mirrors, which is a talking spider. From the Mask of Mirrors is a story about a con artist named Renata, it's set in a Venetian world, and she is trying to get in with the nobility so she can essentially steal from them. That's all I'll tell you about that. It's a wonderful series. You should definitely check it out if you like con artistry and big, like massive stories with huge magic systems. It's fantastic. But there's a character in that book. It's a talking spider, and he's so sassy, so well-spoken and educated. I freaking love him, and I just think that he would be a great addition to having Lady Trent with me as well. They would definitely school me on some things, and I can't wait. And then lastly, the villain that I chose, because I did go the villain route, although I don't have a name for this villain, I just have a characterization. So if you guys have ever read the book This Savage Song, which is by V. Schwab, and it's the Monsters of Verity series. And literally in that book, you focus on multiple types of monsters and the people who have to live with them. And each monster has like a different level of devastation, essentially, that they were created from. So some of them were created from murders. Some of them were created from like really heinous acts that cost like despair in people's lives. And then there are some that are created from these massacre events. And I want my villain in the story to be a character, a monster that is created from one of these massive events. And hopefully me and Lady Trent can figure out why this person has become a villain and maybe help bring the monster to the light. So I know that this was a goofy book tag and definitely one where I'm living in a fantasy world, but I thought it was really fun and I hope that you did as well. Please, like I said, if you would answer at least number 7 for me in the comments, I would love to know what fantasy worlds that you guys created for yourselves or any of the other questions as well. And like I said, if you do have your own channel and you would like to do this book tag, please do that. I would love to hear your answers. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.